when 10-year-old Leo, shivering in a rainstorm and clutching a crumpled piece of paper, looked up at the towering biker. His only hope was the address he had memorized from a whispered conversation. He asked for a ride, a simple request that sent a jolt of profound unease through the seasoned veteran known to his brothers as Sticks. Sticks, a man whose past had trained him to see the fractures in a seemingly solid story, felt his instinct screaming that the boy's desperate plea was a carefully constructed lie hiding a terrifying truth. His split-second decision to trust that feeling and give the boy a ride set off a chain of events that would lead them not to a warm and waiting home, but to the skeletal remains of a derelict, abandoned building, unmasking a dark secret and forging an unbreakable bond in the heart of the storm. The gas station was an island of harsh, buzzing light in an ocean of midnight rain. It clung to the edge of a forgotten highway, a place where people stopped only out of necessity, not desire. The air was thick with the smells of wet asphalt, cheap coffee, and the metallic tang of gasoline. Neon signs, advertising cigarettes and beer, flickered erratically, their colors bleeding across the slick, black puddles that filled the parking lot. It was a place of transience, a brief stop for weary truckers and travelers pushing through the night, a location that felt detached from the rest of the world. Frank Miller, known to everyone who mattered as Sticks, was part of that transient landscape. At 52, he looked like he had been carved from the very road he traveled. His face was a map of long miles and hard sun, framed by a thick, graying beard that descended onto the collar of his leather vest. The vest itself was another map, adorned with patches that told his story, the roaring skull of the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club on the back, and smaller, more personal patches on the front, a flag for his country, a memorial for a fallen brother, and the insignia of the Army Rangers. His calloused hands, resting on the gas pump handle, had known the delicate pressure of a sniper's trigger and the comforting weight of a brother's shoulder. He wasn't a man given to flights of fancy. His world was one of observable facts, of cause and effect. He had retired from the military a decade ago, trading the rigid structure of the service for the looser, yet no less binding, brotherhood of the MC. The Iron Sentinels weren't criminals, they were a collection of veterans and blue-collar workers who found solace in the roar of an engine and the loyalty of men who understood the things you didn't have to say out loud. Sticks was their enforcer, their quiet pillar of strength, a man whose gaze could stop a fight before it started. His Harley-Davidson, a massive machine of chrome and black steel, hissed softly beside him as the rain drummed against its polished tank. He was just passing through, heading back to the clubhouse after visiting an old army buddy in a nearby town. It was a routine ride on a miserable night. He finished filling his tank, screwed the cap on, and was about to swing his leg over the seat when a small voice cut through the sound of the downpour. "Excuse me, mister." Sticks turned slowly. Standing a few feet away, half hidden in the shadow of the station's awning, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He was soaked to the bone, his thin, brightly colored jacket plastered to his small frame. It was a jacket for a cool autumn day, not a cold, driving rain. His sneakers were tattered and dark with water, and he shivered, a constant, uncontrollable tremor that shook his entire body. His hair was matted to his forehead, and his face was pale in the sickly yellow light of the station. But it was his eyes that held Sticks captive. They were wide and dark, filled with a fear so profound it seemed ancient. It was a fear Sticks recognized instantly. He had seen it in the eyes of young soldiers on their first patrol, in the eyes of civilians caught in conflicts they didn't understand. It was the look of someone who knew the world was a dangerous place and that safety was a fragile, temporary thing. The boy was holding a small, crumpled piece of paper in his fist, clutching it like a holy relic. He was trying to be brave, standing straight and meeting the biker's gaze, but the tremor in his small body betrayed him. He was alone. Utterly and completely alone. And in a place like this, at this time of night, alone was the most dangerous thing a child could be. Sticks felt a low hum of warning in his gut. It was a feeling he had learned to trust above all else, an internal alarm system honed by years of walking on the razor's edge between life and death. Everything about this scene was wrong. The time, the weather, the boy's inadequate clothing, the absence of a frantic parent. It was a collection of details that, when assembled, painted a deeply disturbing picture. He crouched down slowly, deliberately making himself smaller, less intimidating. He rested his elbows on his knees, bringing his eyes level with the child's. "You okay there, little man?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, softer than its usual gravelly tone. The boy swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his thin neck. "I'm fine," he said, the words coming out in a shaky whisper. I need some help." Sticks kept his expression neutral, a mask of calm he had perfected long ago. "What kind of help?" "I need a ride," the boy said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. He took a hesitant step forward and unfurled the damp piece of paper. On it, written in a messy, childish scrawl, was an address. "My mom, she's waiting for me here. She sent me to get help because our car broke down. She said to find someone nice and ask for a ride." Sticks looked from the paper to the boy's face. The story was rehearsed. He could hear the practiced cadence, the careful selection of words. Find someone nice. It was what a parent would tell a child, a plausible detail meant to add a layer of authenticity. But it felt hollow. Sticks's mind catalogued the inconsistencies. If the car broke down, why was the boy sent out alone into a storm? Why not the mother? Why was he sent to a gas station miles from the address on the paper? Where was this supposed car? He scanned the parking lot. There were 2 semi-trucks, a sedan with a family sleeping inside, and his bike. No stalled vehicles. No sign of a mother waiting anxiously nearby. He saw something else, too. On the boy's left cheekbone, just below his eye, was a faint, yellowish-purple bruise. It was old, in the final stages of healing, almost invisible under the grime and the rain. But to a trained observer, it stood out like a beacon. It was the kind of bruise that came from an impact, a mark that told a story of its own. He knew what fear looked like. And he knew what a lie sounded like. "Your mom sent you?" Sticks asked again, his voice gentle but firm. "All by yourself in this weather?" The boy flinched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but Sticks saw it. The boy's gaze darted away for a fraction of a second before snapping back, his eyes pleading. "She's not feeling good," he said quickly. "She told me to be a brave soldier and go get help. She said to trust you." That was the signal. That was the confirmation that solidified the unease in his gut into a cold, hard certainty. She said to trust you. The boy had chosen him. He had scanned the few people at this desolate outpost and had walked up to the most physically intimidating man there. Kids didn't do that unless they were looking for a protector, someone who looked like they could handle trouble. The boy wasn't just repeating a line from his mother, he was making a desperate appeal. He was signaling. Sticks's blood went cold. The story was a fabrication, a fragile shield the boy was holding up to protect himself. He wasn't running an errand for his mother. He was running from something. Or someone. The world seemed to fall silent, the rain and the buzzing lights fading into the background. All that existed was the man on his haunches and the desperate child in front of him. In that moment, Frank Miller the biker ceased to exist, and Sticks the ranger took over. The mission was clear: protect the asset. He had a choice to make, and he had to make it in a heartbeat. He could call the police. That was the sensible, responsible thing to do. But he saw the flicker of panic in the boy's eyes at the mere thought of authority. Calling the cops might make the boy bolt, sending him back into the rainy darkness and back to whatever he was fleeing. He could walk away, tell the kid to ask the clerk inside, absolve himself of responsibility. The thought was so repulsive it made him feel sick. Or he could play along. He could step into the boy's flawed story and see where it led. It was a risk. He was a big, bearded man in an MC vest. Taking a child anywhere was a minefield of potential misunderstandings and accusations. But then he looked at the boy's shivering frame, the old bruise on his cheek, and the sheer terror in his eyes. The risk of not acting was infinitely greater. The potential for tragedy if he turned away was a weight he knew he could not bear. He made the decision. "All right, brave soldier," Sticks said, his voice steady. "Let's get you to your mom." He stood up, his full height seeming to block out the harsh lights of the station. He extended a hand to the boy. "My name's Sticks." The boy hesitated for a second, then placed his small, cold hand in Sticks's large, warm one. "I'm Leo," he whispered. "Okay, Leo. We need to get you out of this rain before you freeze." He led the boy toward his bike. "Ever been on a motorcycle before?" Leo shook his head, his eyes wide as he took in the massive machine. It looked like a mechanical beast, powerful and a little frightening. "It's okay. I'll keep you safe," Sticks promised. He took off his own leather vest, the thick cowhide heavy and smelling of rain and road. It was warm from his body heat. He wrapped it around Leo's small shoulders. It was ridiculously large, swallowing him whole, but the boy instantly stopped shivering. He pulled the collar up, burying his face in the warm, protective leather. Sticks carefully lifted the boy and settled him on the seat behind him. He saw Leo wince as he was lifted, another small sign of hidden pain that Sticks filed away. "Hold on tight to me," he instructed, guiding Leo's arms around his waist. "And don't let go for any reason. Understand?" Leo nodded, his face pressed against Sticks's back. He could feel the solid muscle, the reassuring strength of the man in front of him. For the first time all night, a tiny kernel of hope began to grow in his chest. Sticks swung his leg over the bike and settled into the saddle. Before starting the engine, he tapped the Bluetooth communicator on his helmet. "Deacon, you there?" he said quietly. A voice crackled in his ear, clear despite the storm. "Loud and clear, Sticks." "What's up?" Deacon was the club's road captain, a former Marine and a man Sticks trusted with his life. "I've got a situation," Sticks said, keeping his voice low so Leo couldn't hear. "I'm at the gas station off Highway 12. I've picked up a kid, maybe 10 years old. Says his mom is waiting for him. Story feels wrong. All my alarm bells are ringing." There was a pause, then Deacon's voice returned, all business. "What do you need?" He gave me an address. 1417 Industrial Way. On the east side of town. I need you to run it. Find out what's there. And I need you and a couple of the boys to meet me there. Don't crowd me, just be my eyes. I don't want to spook the kid, but I don't want to walk into a trap either. Consider it done, Deacon said without hesitation. We're 5 minutes from the clubhouse. We'll be rolling in 10. Keep your comms open. We'll be on your 6-inch. Thanks, brother, Sticks said. He ended the call and twisted the throttle. The Harley roared to life, a deep, thunderous sound that vibrated through Leo's small body. The boy tightened his grip. Sticks pulled out of the gas station, the bike's headlight cutting a path through the sheets of rain, heading toward the address that felt less like a destination and more like a reckoning. The ride across town was a journey through a world washed clean of color. The city lights were blurred and distorted by the rain-streaked visor of Sticks's helmet. They passed darkened storefronts and lonely traffic lights that cycled through their colors for an audience of empty streets. The industrial district was the city's forgotten corner, a place where factories had once hummed with life but now stood as silent, decaying monuments to a bygone era. Sticks tried to engage Leo in conversation, his voice a calm presence relayed through the helmet. "So, you live around here?" "Sometimes," Leo answered, his voice muffled by Sticks's back. The one-word answer was another red flag. "What's your mom's name?" A long pause. "Sarah," the boy finally said. It sounded like he had to search for the name. Sticks didn't push. He knew the boy was walking a tightrope, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Instead, he just rode, letting the steady rhythm of the engine be a comforting presence. He could feel the tension in the small arms wrapped around his waist. This wasn't the excited grip of a child on his first motorcycle ride, it was the desperate clutch of a drowning person holding onto a lifeline. As they got closer to the address, the neighborhood devolved. Paved roads gave way to cracked asphalt riddled with potholes. Streetlights became fewer and farther between, casting long, menacing shadows. The buildings were skeletal warehouses with broken windows like vacant eyes. Weeds grew thick and untamed in every crack and crevice. This was not a place where anyone lived. It was a place where things were left to die. "We're getting close," Sticks said. He felt Leo stiffen behind him. Finally, he saw the numbers painted on the side of a massive, crumbling brick building, 1417. He slowed the bike to a halt, the engine dropping to a low, rumbling idle. The address was an abandoned warehouse. The front gate was chained shut, rusted and sagging. The windows were a mix of shattered panes and rotting plywood. Graffiti covered every available surface, layers of spray paint telling stories of decay and neglect. There were no lights, no car, no sign of life whatsoever. A cold dread settled in Sticks's stomach. This was worse than he had imagined. This wasn't a home. It wasn't even a shelter. It was a tomb. His comm crackled to life. "Sticks, I'm looking at the same thing you are," Deacon's voice said, low and urgent. "County records say this place was condemned 5 years ago after a fire. It's a ghost. Me, Ripper, and Bear are at the end of the block." "What's the play?" "Hold your position," Sticks commanded. "Cover the back. I'm calling it in." He turned his head slightly. "Leo," he said softly. "This doesn't look like the right place. Are you sure this is the address?" Behind him, the boy started to shake again, but this time it wasn't from the cold. A small, choked sob escaped his lips. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I lied. She's not here. Nobody is here." Sticks killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain. He reached back and gave the boy's leg a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, son. You're safe now. Just stay on the bike for me. Don't move." He pulled out his phone with practiced efficiency. His fingers were steady as he dialed 911. "I need police and an ambulance at 1417 Industrial Way," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I have a 10-year-old boy here, Leo. He's been abandoned. The building is derelict. I have reason to believe there may be someone inside." As he was talking to the dispatcher, he saw it. A faint, unsteady flicker of light in one of the grimy, second-story windows. It was there for a second, then gone. A candle? A flashlight? It didn't matter. Someone was in there. "Dispatch, I have a visual," he said into the phone. "Light on the second floor. I can't leave the boy alone, but I can't wait. My associates are securing the perimeter. I'm going to make entry." Before the dispatcher could protest, he heard the roar of engines. Deacon, Ripper, and Bear pulled up, their headlights cutting through the darkness, surrounding the warehouse in a web of light. They moved with the silent, coordinated precision of a military unit, dismounting and taking up positions at the corners of the building. They were his brothers, and they had his back without question. "Stay with the kid," Sticks ordered Bear, a mountain of a man who looked even more intimidating than Sticks himself but was known for his gentle nature. Bear nodded, moving to stand beside the Harley, a silent, unmovable guardian. Sticks turned to Deacon and Ripper. "Let's go." They found a side door, its lock long since rusted away. Sticks pushed it open, and it groaned in protest. The air that rushed out was cold and damp, thick with the smell of mold, rot, and something else, something foul and human. The smell of despair. Inside, it was pitch black. Sticks switched on the powerful flashlight on his phone. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a cavernous space filled with debris, old machinery shrouded in cobwebs, and piles of trash. Rats skittered away from the light. "Upstairs," Sticks whispered, pointing the beam toward a rusty metal staircase. They moved silently, their boots making soft sounds on the gritty concrete floor. Each step up the staircase creaked, the sound echoing in the vast, empty space. On the second floor, they found the source of the light. In a small, cleared-out corner, a man was slumped against a damp wall. A single candle flickered on the floor beside him, casting dancing, distorted shadows. He was thin and gaunt, with hollow eyes and the sallow skin of a serious addict. An empty bottle lay by his side. This was Marcus, Leo's stepfather. He looked up as their shadows fell over him, his eyes struggling to focus. He was barely conscious, lost in a haze of alcohol or drugs. There was no fight in him, no defiance. There was nothing left but the empty shell of a man. "Where's his mother?" Deacon growled, his voice a low threat. Marcus just blinked slowly, a pathetic, vacant expression on his face. "Gone," he slurred. "Took off months ago." The truth hit Sticks with the force of a physical blow. The boy hadn't just been neglected for a night. He had been alone with this man for months, trapped in a nightmare. The story about his mom waiting was a fantasy, a desperate hope he had clung to. The address wasn't a place his mother was waiting, it was a place he had heard Marcus talking about, a place to hide. He hadn't been sent for help, he had finally found the courage to escape and seek it for himself. Just then, the warehouse was flooded with the flashing red and blue lights of police cars. Officers swarmed the building, their voices sharp and professional. The confrontation was over before it began. Marcus was cuffed and led away, a shambling, pathetic figure who didn't even seem to understand what was happening. Paramedics moved in, but Sticks was already heading back down the stairs. He emerged from the dark warehouse into the flashing lights of the real world. His only concern was Leo. He found him right where he had left him, still sitting on the Harley, wrapped in the leather vest, with the massive form of Bear standing guard. The boy was watching the scene unfold with wide, terrified eyes. Sticks walked over and gently lifted him off the bike. Leo clung to him, burying his face in his shoulder, his small body trembling violently. "It's over, kid," Sticks whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's all over. You're safe." He held the boy, shielding him from the chaos of the scene, a solid rock in a turbulent sea. The rain began to subside, as if the storm itself had finally broken. The lead detective, a sharp-eyed woman named Sergeant Miller, approached him. She looked from the imposing biker to the small child clinging to him, her expression softening. "You're the one who called this in." "I am," Sticks said. "You did good," she said, her voice filled with genuine respect. "We've been getting calls about this kid for weeks, panhandling, sleeping in doorways, but he always vanished before a patrol car could get there. Marcus has a long sheet. We've been looking for a reason to get inside his last known address, but we needed cause. You gave it to us. You got him out." She looked at Leo with a sad, gentle expression. Most people would have just looked away. "Thank you." Her words were a validation, but Sticks didn't need them. The only validation he needed was the feeling of the small boy's arms wrapped tightly around his neck. At the police station, the world began to come back into focus for Leo. The building was warm and dry. Someone gave him a thick blanket and a cup of hot chocolate that tasted like the best thing he had ever had. Sitting in a quiet office with a kind social worker, and with Sticks waiting patiently in a chair just outside the door, the full story finally came out. His mother had left months ago. His stepfather, Marcus, had grown more and more volatile. He made Leo go out and beg for money, punishing him when he came back with too little. The old bruise on his cheek was from a week ago. Tonight, Marcus had been angrier than ever. Leo had known he had to leave. He had run out into the storm with no plan, just the desperate need to escape. The address was a place he'd overheard some older kids talking about, a supposed hideout. He thought it would be a safe place to hide for the night. When he saw Sticks at the gas station, something inside him had just clicked. He looked safe, Leo told the social worker, his small voice barely a whisper. His jacket had an eagle on it. Like a superhero. The social worker smiled. She already knew what Sticks and the Iron Sentinels were. They had a reputation in town, tough, but with a fierce code of honor, especially when it came to protecting kids. The best news came a few hours later. They had located Leo's maternal grandparents. They lived 2 states away and had been fighting for custody ever since their daughter had fallen in with Marcus, but they had lost track of them 6 months ago. They had been frantic with worry. When they got the call, they dropped everything and started driving. They arrived the next afternoon, their faces etched with anxiety and sleeplessness. They were an older couple, with kind eyes and hands that trembled as they walked into the family services center. The moment Leo saw them, he let out a cry and ran. His grandmother enveloped him in a hug, sobbing his name over and over, while his grandfather knelt beside them, his hand on Leo's head, his own eyes streaming with tears. Sticks stood in the corner of the room, a silent witness to the reunion. He felt like an intruder and was about to slip away when the grandfather looked up, his eyes finding Sticks. He stood and walked over, pulling the biker into a fierce, grateful hug. "You're the man who found him," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "The social worker told us everything. Thank you. How can we ever thank you for saving our grandson?" Sticks was not a man comfortable with praise or open emotion. He simply clapped the older man on the shoulder. "Just take care of him," he said, his voice gruff. "That's all the thanks I need." Before they left, Leo ran back to Sticks. He held out the big leather vest. "This is yours," he said. Sticks knelt down. "You keep it," he said. "Every brave soldier needs his armor." He gave the boy his phone number. "You call me if you ever need anything. Anything at all. You hear me?" Leo nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you, Sticks," he said. "Thank you for seeing me." 2 years passed. The seasons turned, and the memory of that rainy night began to fade, replaced by a new reality. Leo was no longer the pale, shivering child from the gas station. He was 12 now, healthy and happy, with a smile that reached his eyes. Living with his grandparents had transformed him. He was at the top of his class, the star pitcher on his little league team, and had a pack of friends he was fiercely loyal to. The trauma was still a part of his story, a scar he would always carry, but it no longer defined him. He was a survivor, and he was thriving. Sticks, or as Leo now called him, Uncle Frank, was a permanent and beloved fixture in his life. The two-state distance meant nothing. At least once a month, Sticks would make the long ride on his Harley to visit. They'd go to baseball games, work on Leo's grandfather's old pickup truck, or just sit on the porch and talk. Sticks was teaching him about engines, about honor, and about the quiet strength that comes from surviving the storm. Every Christmas and birthday, a package would arrive from the Iron Sentinels clubhouse, filled with gear from their favorite team or the latest video game. Leo was their kid, their mascot, and every member of the club would have walked through fire for him. The walls of Sticks's locker at the clubhouse were covered with Leo's drawings, colorful, happy pictures of motorcycles, baseball diamonds, and a big, smiling man with a gray beard. They were reminders of a promise kept, of a life saved. But the impact of that night rippled even further. Inspired by Leo's story, the Iron Sentinels started a new initiative. They called it the Sentinels Watched. In partnership with local child protective services and shelters, they created a network of resources for at-risk youth. They used their own money to fund a 24-hour hotline, and the clubhouse became an official safe place, a location where any kid in trouble could go for help, no questions asked. They organized charity rides to raise money for emergency supplies, clothes, food, and blankets for children who had been removed from dangerous homes. Sticks's single act of trusting his gut had grown into a shield for hundreds of other vulnerable children in the community. One warm summer evening, Sticks and Leo sat in a booth at a local diner, sharing a strawberry milkshake. Leo was talking animatedly about a grand slam he had hit in his last game, his hands moving to demonstrate the swing. He was laughing, his face bright with the pure, uncomplicated joy of being a kid. Sticks watched him, a rare, gentle smile touching his own lips. In the boy's laughter, he found a sense of peace and purpose that had been missing from his life for a very long time. He had fought in wars, seen the best and worst of humanity, and built a life on a foundation of strength and brotherhood. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that the most important moment of his entire life hadn't happened on a battlefield. It had happened in the rain-soaked parking lot of a lonely gas station. It was a quiet reminder that the world is full of people who need help. It served as proof that sometimes, the greatest act of heroism is not a grand, explosive gesture, but the simple, profound act of paying attention. It is the choice to stop, to listen to that quiet voice of instinct, and to see the person right in front of you who is desperately hoping that someone, finally, will.